All right, welcome back. So in our last explainer, we kind of cracked open a huge secret about history. It's not just a boring list of dates and facts, it's a story. And as we found out, whoever is telling that story holds all the power. And that, my friends, leads us to an even bigger question.
I mean, really, think about it. If you have a massive music playlist with thousands of songs, you don't just leave it as one big jumbled mess, do you? Of course not. You create categories, by genre, by artist, maybe by decade. Well, historians do the exact same thing with the past. It's got a fancy name, periodization. But as we are about to find out how they decide to label those periods, that can change absolutely everything.
To really get this, we need to travel back in time and meet our main character for today, a guy named James Mill. He was a Scottish economist and a political philosopher who, way back in the early 1800s, came up with this hugely influential idea about how to organize the entire story of India.
Let's lock in this date, 1817. This is the year Mill publishes a gigantic 3-volume book called A History of British India. And this thing wasn't just a bestseller, it pretty much became the instruction manual for British officials in India. It literally shaped how they saw the country for generations to come.
So, how did Mill organize thousands and thousands of years of history? He sorted it all into 3 neat little boxes, and he based it on just one single thing, the religion of the rulers. So you had the Hindu period, then you had the Muslim period, and finally, the British period. Seems simple, right? Well, the thinking behind that simplicity is where things get really, really messy.
And here's the core of it. This quote lays it all out. Mill wasn't just organizing history, he was judging it. In his mind, pre-British India was, backward, a place full of cruel rulers, what he called despotism, and superstition. He genuinely believed that societies in Asia were just on the lower rung of the civilization ladder compared to Europe. So, if that's what you believe, what's the solution? For Mill, it was obvious. The British needed to take over all of it. He actually argued that only by introducing European laws, arts, and their entire way of life could India be civilized. In his worldview, British conquest wasn't about power or greed. No, it was about bringing progress and enlightenment and happiness to the Indian people. Yeah, a pretty controversial idea, to put it mildly. Okay, time out. Let's put on our history detective hats for a second. Does this whole 3-box system actually make any sense? Can the story of millions and millions of people over hundreds of years really be boiled down to the faith of the one person sitting on the throne? This chart just lays out the problem perfectly. Mill's idea was super simple, but the reality, it was incredibly complex. I mean, you had a huge variety of faiths: Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, Jainism, so many others, all living and existing together. So labeling an entire age Hindu or Muslim just completely erases all of that diversity. And worse, it suggests that the lives and beliefs of regular people just didn't matter. Mill's boxes were way too simple for a complicated world.
So, after realizing just how flawed Mill's approach was, historians started looking for a different model. And it's probably one you're a lot more familiar with from your school textbooks.
Ancient, medieval, and modern. Ring a bell? This timeline is pretty much the standard way of dividing up history. But, and there's always a but, it comes with its own set of problems. You see, this whole model was actually borrowed from the West, where the idea of what modern means is very, very specific. So in Western history, when we talk about the modern period, we're talking about all of these big, powerful ideas taking root. The growth of science, of reason, the rise of democracy, and these amazing ideals of liberty and equality for everyone. It's seen as this great leap forward for humanity. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. If the British period in India is supposed to be its modern era, did the people living there actually get to experience any of these modern values? Did they have equality? Did they have liberty? Did they have democracy?
And when you look at the reality for most people, the answer is a big fat no. Under British rule, Indians did not have equality, they didn't have freedom, and they definitely didn't have liberty. There was no real economic progress for the vast majority of people. So, if all the key ingredients of a modern era are missing, can we really even use that label? It just doesn't fit.
So if modern is the wrong word, what's the right one? Well, it turns out historians have a much more accurate and much more powerful word to describe this period in India's story.
And that word is colonial. Colonization is the process where one country subjugates another.
It brings it under its complete control. And in doing that, it changes everything: politics, the economy, society, even culture. This term doesn't just describe a period of time, it describes a power dynamic. It tells you who's really in charge.
Which brings us to our most important takeaway from all of this. The words we use, the labels we put on the past, they matter a lot. Calling a period Hindu or Muslim or even modern can actually hide the real story. But a word like colonial, that tells a much more accurate story about power, about control, and about what was really happening. The words we choose literally shape our understanding of the past.
So this leaves us with a really fascinating puzzle. If official histories and simple labels can be so misleading, how on earth do we uncover the real, messy, complicated stories of what actually happened? What kind of clues do historians use to piece it all together?
Well, guess what? That is exactly what we're going to dive into in Part 3. We are putting our detective hats back on to investigate the real sources that historians use, and we're going to discover why the official story is almost never the whole story. You won't want to miss it. Join us then.
But before you go, let's do a super quick rapid-fire recap of our key terms. Periodization, that's just dividing history into chunks. Colonization, when one country takes over another. Subjugation, that's the act of bringing a country under your thumb. A despot, a really cruel, all-powerful ruler. And superstition, a belief that's not based on reason. Got it? Awesome. We'll see you next time.